Hello. How is everyone out there in YouTube world, Facebook world, social media world, the world? Thank you for joining another edition of Musings with MGL. As I always do, I would like to ask you if you like what you hear and like what you see, click the little subscribe button down there in the corner, click the notification bell, ding ding, and you'll get the notifications of whenever I do new videos so you can keep getting all the fine content that I'm producing here for everybody. I did just hit a milestone of 100 subscribers, so that was pretty cool. I got a fancy little email from YouTube congratulating me and telling me good job, so I'd like to thank everybody who subscribed so far. That's pretty cool. I didn't know how many people were going to like to tune in and hear what I have to say, so the fact that the site seems to be growing, I seem to be getting a lot of people clicking and liking and sharing and commenting. I would really appreciate it. So if you all could keep doing that, that would be great. I appreciate it. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, kind of been musing over different things that I wanted to maybe talk about going forward and all the stuff that's going on out there with the plague that's going around, the virus and everything else. And I kind of wanted to touch on something that's been a little bit hard for some of us in certain circles to deal with as it relates to this virus. And that is basically, how do you handle a situation like this when you are what I like to call myself like a rugged individualist? Meaning when you are kind of a small government, libertarian-minded person and you don't like kind of being told what to do, and you don't like being told where to go, and you don't like governments using power, you don't like checks being sent out by the government, you don't like handouts, you don't like all these kind of things, and you find yourself in this weird situation where the government is doing all of those things, both good and bad. So they're doing the bad things like locking you down, telling you can't go anywhere, arresting you when you violate their orders and stuff. And then they're doing what some people would consider good things, such as passing stimulus packages or bailouts. They're not really bailouts. They're more of a stimulus situation, or a stopgap measure, as I like to call them. They're sending checks to people who need them. They're helping to get small business loans. As somebody who's a small business owner, that's great that they're willing to help us out by sending out all these loans and stuff. So what do you do in a situation like that when you're somebody who doesn't like to rely on the government, and then you find yourself and your country in a situation where you need to rely on the government? Well, I'll say the same thing that I always basically say is governments generally suck at everything that they do. And they're even kind of sucking at this too. You see all the different things going on out there with the things that not just, federal government, but state governments or whatever. A lot of people are making mistakes. Some people maybe missed the ball on this. Some people aren't organizing correctly. Some governors or some politicians are going for real big overreach. And, they get a little bit of opportunity to steal some power. They're going to go out and steal some power. You see them pointing fingers at each other, backstabbing each other, accusing people of things. So even this issue, they're not doing well, because that's evidence that the government in general doesn't do things well, even when they have to. So what do you do in a situation where you have to rely on the government, but you know that they don't do anything real well? So it's just an issue. I mean, I don't necessarily have the answers for that. I'll muse a little bit about some things that are going on. Obviously, as I've said before, I don't believe that a lot of these orders that they're doing are necessarily constitutional, where they're sending cops out to arrest people and break up parties and write you citations. Here in Florida, where I'm at, the Supreme Court just issued an order that everybody who gets arrested for violation of a curfew or a stay-at-home order or anything along those lines is now allowed to be held without bond. So it's not just that you're getting arrested, they're holding you without bond until you can go in front of a judge at your first appearances, which normally takes 24 hours, but sometimes in emergency situations it can be suspended even longer during hurricanes and stuff like that. So now they're putting people on par with some of the other people who don't get bonds in Florida, such as first-degree murderers, rapists, people who get charged with domestic batteries get zero bonds until they go in front of a judge. There's a very small list of people who aren't entitled to a bond. Immediately upon getting arrested, they have to go in front of a judge, and they now have lumped people who violate these orders in the same category as these other people. That's crazy to me. It's insanely crazy to me, and it just shows again that the governments, when they get a chance, are going to do the overreach that a lot of us don't like. On a larger topic, so let's deal with something like the $1 trillion, $2 trillion stimulus bailout package, whatever you want to call it. Normally, I would be opposed, obviously, to something like that, and so would most small government, libertarian-minded people. However, in this particular case, I do see it as a little bit of a difference because the government are the ones who have essentially caused this issue, okay? It's not as if there was a financial meltdown due to bad investments or weird economic stockbroker things or some sort of a dot-com bubble. This wasn't based on the normal fluctuations of the market or the chances that people generally take in a capitalist society. The government has essentially shut down the country, okay? By order and by edict, the government is telling you can't work. They're telling you can't open your business. They're telling you can't go places you want to go. So the economic calamity that we find ourselves in today is the direct result of the actions of the federal government and the local governments and the state governments. So as it relates to this issue, I kind of look at it as a you break it, you buy it situation. So because they're the ones who have destroyed the economy with these actions, whether rightly or wrongly, we'll figure that out several months down the road when the dust settles. Was it a smart thing to do? Was it a bad thing to do? That's not what this video is about. But this video is about the fact that this is happening because of the government. So if the government broke it, then they need to buy it. So I don't particularly have as big a problem with this type of a handout or whatever you want to call it, because this isn't like a socialist style check where they want to basically pay people $1,000 a month to sit at home and not work because they don't want to, or then they want to steal it from rich people and give it to poor people as some sort of a redistribution situation. That's where you'd get into your socialist concepts. These are not checks that are socialist in nature, in that they're not doing it to punish rich people and raise up poor people through some sort of redistribution. They're not doing it to reward people who are either unable or unwilling to work as you would in a socialist setting. These are direct payments. They're kind of reimbursement payments for the taking that the government has done to your business or to your income. It's similar if they want to build a railroad or a highway or something through your property. They can't just come in and take your property and say, tough, we're building a railroad. They have to come in and they have to give you what's called just compensation under the takings clause. So they can come in and take your property, but they got to pay you for it. So I akin this situation to that, in that the government is taking from you your ability to work and earn a living by their draconian, in my opinion, measures related to this crisis issue. Therefore, what they're doing is giving you money to compensate you for what they've taken. And that's perfectly allowable under the Constitution. So I don't have a particular problem with them doing that, obviously. Now, certainly there's going to be some restrictions on that. You don't want to just open up the piggy bank and keep piling it up, because eventually it is technically debt and you have to pay it back. But I do see this situation a little bit differently than other situations. I see a lot of memes on Facebook and other places where people are like, oh, well, all you socialism haters, you better not take that check. Or, oh, all you Bernie Sanders haters, you better not take that check because I thought you didn't take government checks. Well, this isn't a government handout. This is a help that people need based on the direct actions of the government. So I do feel that is a huge distinction here that needs to be talked about, and it can't just be dismissed. And you also got the other people saying, oh, for all those people who kept saying Trump's not your president, you should send that check back. Well, look, that's equally as stupid, okay? I mean, whether they like the guy or don't like the guy or whatever, he is in charge of the government right now, and they are the ones that are shutting the system down. Again, rightly or wrongly, we can talk about that later. I'm not going to talk about who's to blame or anything, but that's just the reality of what's happening. So how do you deal as a rugged individualist with something that's going on like this? And you basically have to stick to your guns when you can, obviously. Don't just take everything that they throw at you. Fight when you can. there's no reason to get in arguments with people on Facebook or social media about it, because it's really not going to solve anything. You just got to keep sticking to your roots and realize that, what's going on here is unique. It is something that's different. It's something that we'll get through, but just keep doing, what you've been doing. My other conflict about this situation is you're dealing with this concept of what we always talk about is, federalism. You got the small governments, and you got the local governments, and you got the state governments, and you got the federal system. And you see all these people out there calling for Trump to declare a national stay at home, when they don't understand that you can't do that. Obviously, he doesn't have the legal authority to do that. Every state has to make up their own mind on that issue. He has certainly no constitutional basis or authority to do that. And I've said this before in other videos. I find it funny that the people who thought that he was going to do something like that all along are now the ones calling for him to do it. I find that to be quite ironic. However, that being said, this concept of how they're dealing with this issue and like a one-size-fits-all issue, where they're trying to say that what they got to do in New York is what they got to do in Montana or in North Carolina. That's ridiculous as well. So that's another thing that strikes at my heart as a federalist, rugged individualist, libertarian style person, is this notion that the federal government has a one-size-fits-all attitude when it comes to this virus, that they want to say what works in New York is going to work in Montana, or what works in North Dakota is going to work in California. And that's not simply not true. Every state has things to do, has ways to deal with this differently than any other states, and what may work in one state is not going to work in another state. I mean, you can have those things within states. I mean, just because you may have a situation, for example, in New York City, because they're all stacked and on top of each other, doesn't mean that you're going to have the same policy for upstate New York, where there may be rural areas where only a couple people live, and you don't have to do that. So when you see all these governments and these politicians wanting to do this blanket kind of one-size-fits-all for their states and for their federal government, that's not how it works either. The good thing about America is that we have an individual federalist-style system where you start with local governments, and then you work your way up to bigger and bigger governments, and they all have limited power, the further you go up the chain. So I think that if we were to get away from this concept of everybody in the country needs to do the same thing and let the states and localities handle their situations differently, my personal opinion is that would be a better way to handle this than this blanket everybody do what I say attitude that you see coming from politicians as you get higher up the chain. But that's something else that we're just gonna have to deal with as a rugged individualist. There's a lot of thinking that we got to do, a lot of things we got going on out there that are gonna rub us the wrong way going on in the near future, and all we can do is kind of hopefully stick together, keep pushing back when we can push back, and hopefully things will sort it out sometime in the future. So I just wanted to this is called Musings. Sometimes you're going to see me on here, not just make a point. You're going to see me on here and just kind of throwing out questions, just discussing things, just rambling things. And instead of doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm lying in bed, I'm doing it here while I'm recording on a video, so you guys can all watch and muse with me as well. So I didn't want to give out any answers today or any discussions or any advice or legality issues. I just wanted to kind of muse for a little bit about things that I've been thinking about, things that are going on in my head out there. So if any of you have these same kind of musings or questions or want to comment on what I have to say, again, go ahead and comment down in the comment section there, and we'll see if we can answer some of those questions and kind of sort these things out together, because right now we all kind of have to stick together as a country, and even in our own little subsets of how we feel and how we want to live our lives. So thanks for watching again. Please click and subscribe if you'd like to. If you have any questions or comments, please leave one below. Otherwise, stay safe, stay healthy, stay open if you can, and as always, carry on.